Welcome to Consulting Mastery, where we help B2B consultants master the business of consulting. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Ahmed. Join us as we explore the art of delivering outstanding client value, earning a higher income, and thriving in today's marketplace. Hey folks, welcome back to Consulting Mastery. Before we get you to this week's episode, I wanted to let you know that we have a live workshop coming up on power positioning for consultants. If you want to learn the exact same framework that we teach our clients inside 90-Day Pipeline of how to position themselves as the one and only indisputable choice in their markets, attract perfect clients, and command premium fees, you can do so on our live workshop at powerpositioningworkshop.com. It's just $49 to join us, and you can grab your seat at powerpositioningworkshop.com. With that, here's this week's episode.
So today I want to talk about a very particular topic, and that is competition. And more specifically, the fact that often we are competing with the wrong entities, or at least think we're competing with entities that aren't really the ones we should be worried about. So let's dig into that. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean. We're out there in the world as consultants. We are speaking to prospects about what we can do for them. And in the back of many of our minds, there's the feeling that there is somebody else, right? There's another consultant. There's someone who does something either exactly the same or kind of the same as what I do. And this particular prospect is going to choose between me and them. And I am here to say that that is not really the thing to worry about. That is potentially a thing to worry about, but not your biggest challenge. So tell me how that lands.
Yeah, it really comes down to the stage of the buyer's journey that the client is in. So just to provide a really simple framework for thinking about the buyer's journey, you have three distinct stages in the buyer's journey. You have the awareness stage, you have the consideration stage, and you have the decision stage. And just to apply some very basic definitions, the awareness stage is where they're developing awareness around a problem that's being faced. And they're not really doing anything about it right now. They're just gathering information, maybe doing some research, and just kind of getting their bearings on what the heck's going on. The consideration stage is where they start to look at options. What can we do? How can we solve the problem? And there's a hidden option that you're referring to that we'll talk about in a minute outside of working with one of your competitors. And then the decision stage is, well, let's now do this. Let's hire this person. Let's do this, that, or the other. And so what often happens is if you end up engaging with a client in the consideration and the decision stages, then they've likely already talked to other people like you, or they're planning on talking to other people like you because they're at that stage in the process where they've likely committed to solving the problem and they're looking at options, and you're probably one of a few, if not many. But what often happens in the earlier stages of the buyer's journey, when you get people in kind of the awareness stage or the earlier parts of the consideration stage, they might not have talked to very many people yet, like you, very many consultants or firms, boutiques, etc. And they're still making the decision as to whether they need to hire for this externally or whether they can do this on their own internally. And I'll be the first to tell you, and this may hurt some of your feelings, and I apologize in advance, but it's the truth. Clients don't want to hire consultants. It's not, I tell people this all the time. No client ever woke up in the morning and said, boy, I need a consultant. Today's the day we're going to get ourselves a good old-fashioned consultant and write them a big fat check and hope for some better results. That's not a thing that clients desire to do. In fact, they will avoid it as much as they possibly can because it's generally cheaper to not hire a consultant and to do it on their own. So something to be aware of, it's this kind of hidden competitor, and it's going to be a bigger or smaller issue depending on at what stage of the buyer's journey you end up interacting with the client. But there is this option. It's their preferred option is to do it themselves and save themselves the money.
Maybe two things I'll add to that. One is that it can be really easy to just assume that the people you're talking to are in the decision stage. right? And I think that happens far too often. If they're talking to me, then obviously they're ready to buy. And that's not always true, to your point. But you need to be really adept at digging around and figuring out where along that path they are, because not meeting them where they are is going to be problematic in a whole bunch of ways, least of which is this assumption that you're going to make about what your competition looks like. And the other thing I'll add is that, yes, they may be deciding to do it themselves. They also have another decision, which is not doing anything at all. And we also, I think, forget that because we are so tied into the thing that we can do, right? To the value we can bring, to the solution that we can deliver, that we forget that sometimes people are just willing to live with some pain if it doesn't seem painful enough, if there are other priorities, if, right? And so all of this to say, really getting clear and getting curious about what your client's all about, what they really need right now, how they're feeling in the moment. That's the thing that's going to help you meet them where they are, have a more successful conversation, and not be fighting this, imaginary competition that we're talking about today.
Well, how often do we hear, our clients say, I don't understand, they have a problem. I'm imitating our clients. I love all of you for the record, right? But this is what you sound like sometimes, right? They have a problem. The client has a problem and they know I can solve it. I can't for the life of me understand why they don't want to proceed right away and write me a big check. Well, the reality is they got lots of problems, right? And no client and no executive and no decision maker is sitting there without problems and without pains. They're deliberately choosing to live with in this moment. Right? They're deliberately deciding that these are pains. Well, I would say sometimes deliberately and sometimes not deliberately, but at some level they're making a choice that I got to live with this pain right now because I'm solving for something else altogether. And those are choices that we all make every single day. So just because you've got somebody that has a problem and you have a solution does not mean they're willing to buy. And, the thing I want you to think about is, and folks tend to, overemphasize the solution part of the equation, that once they have the solution, then people should just transact. But for a buyer to transact, they have to make a series of decisions before they choose your solution. For example, the first decision is this a problem that we need to solve? And that happens in that awareness stage of the buyer's journey. And the questions they're asking there are, how big is the problem? Can we tolerate it? Who's it hurting? What are the consequences of it? Is it acute? Is it chronic? It's all these questions, but all designed to help them understand and identify, is this something that we need to actually take seriously, dedicate attention to, investigate further? Okay. And if the answer is yes, then the question becomes, and this is now in that consideration stage, okay, what are our options? What can we do? All right, we got consultants. We've got some methods where we can do this in-house. And here they're not necessarily looking at, do we hire or do we do it internally? And that may be part of the equation, but they're also looking at what are the methodologies available to us? What are the strategies available to us? This is where folks are, hopping on workshops and downloading white papers and doing searches on Google, LinkedIn, AI, whatever it may be. They're looking for resources and guidance on the options available to them and the strategies available to them. And that plays a role in determining whether this is something they want to solve for now. And then finally, once they've evaluated all the options, including doing it themselves and working with you and your competitors, now they're making a decision on which path to pursue. So to your point, if you're walking into every sales conversation assuming that someone's at the decision stage, you're gonna play your cards wrong, probably, if that's your assumption. And I would add to that, for the majority of consultants, you don't actually want clients to be at the decision stage when you first interact with them. And that might sound counterintuitive. I'm guessing folks are going to want to know why, Carrie.
Tell us why.
Well, the big reason is at the decision stage, they've largely formed their opinions on the matter. They've done their homework, they've done their research, and they've decided, well, this problem exists for this reason, and therefore this is the best solution. And so what do you got? and they're looking for order takers. Can you do it? For how much? And you don't have a lot of leeway in influencing their thinking on the problem because they've been through that thought process and you are nowhere to be found. Whereas if you get them, and this is ultimately a marketing opportunity, if you get them in the earlier stages, in that awareness stage or early on in the decision stage, where they're still kind of getting their bearings and forming their opinions about the problem that they're facing, that's where you have opportunity to influence their thinking and therefore position them to pursue a solution that's similar to yours.
And really, practically speaking, this all comes back to listening, right? To paying attention, to asking questions, to being curious, to doing all of these things that can be difficult. If you are speaking to your, 20th person this month, it's easy to make assumptions. And the other thing that we all love is a system, right? A process, a checklist. And so it's also tempting to go into one of these discovery conversations with a list of things that you're going to say, a list of things that you're going to ask, and not leave yourself open, right? Not leave yourself the opportunity to truly understand what's happening. And a couple things can happen when that's the case, right? One is you're going to go through this whole conversation and it's just not going to be successful. And the other is that you are going to really just waste time, right? Because you're going to be chasing the conversation down a path that it doesn't need to be chased. And you are going to mentally be going through the gymnastics that are required when you're not paying attention to the right things. And all of this means that your entire business development process becomes less and less efficient. You are, wasting more and more energy, and you're not getting the result you want. And so we talk here a lot about customer listening, right? Finding out what your customer needs and wants. And we often talk about that in the context of marketing, but it never ends. This is where you need to really walk into a conversation with the particular person that you're conversing with on that day and truly being committed to understanding exactly where they are in the buyer's journey. What other challenges they have? How do they really feel about this? Did they just, click on a link because they saw you somewhere and they're not really too excited or interested? Or is this something that they really need to solve? What are their other options? These are all things that are really crucial to understand. Feels like it takes a bit more time in the moment, but well worth your effort and energy.
Because that's what drives decisions, right? So we're overly focused on the decision. Did they choose me? Did they not choose me? Did they hire a competitor? Did they do it internally? And that decision is the consequence of a series of other decisions. Like that final decision is the consequence of a series of other minier, that's not a word, right? Smaller, mini or smaller decisions that cultivated in the final decision. And so if you want to influence the final decision, you have to understand what those other smaller decisions are that they've made along the path at the different stages of the buyer's journey to ultimately have influence. And one point I want to make here that's really important is, an educated client, a responsible client who wants the best for themselves and their business and their organization and their department and their people and so on and so forth, they generally don't just hire a consultant before they've tried to do something internally. That's a general rule, and there's exceptions to that rule, but as a general rule, you can count on an educated, responsible buyer having, made some attempts so far, and therefore having some formed opinions about the problem that they're facing. And so, therefore, it's not enough for you to come and present a solution because they've seen solutions before. They've maybe implemented solutions before, perhaps not as robust or strategic as yours, fine, but they've attempted something in the past. And so part of what you need to do here, apart from just presenting a solution and saying, well, here it is you've got to be able to explain why the attempts they've made in the past have not worked and how your solution will work despite those attempts. That's a big, big part of the marketing exercise. I love how people like to minimize this whole game to, well, if I just get in front of the right client, I'll be able to win the deal. No, you won't. You've got to have a solution that shows your prospective client that you have a better way of doing things that will assure results than what they've tried in the past and what they're otherwise looking at.